All right. Well, I'm sure there are going to be more people joining, but we have all of our speakers, so I think we'll get started. So I'm going to introduce myself, and I have a little piece that I'll do, and then we have five total speakers, so four other speakers here tonight, and I have the order here, and I'll just call on you, and you'll do your piece. I think that then no one has to worry about introducing the next person. I am Suzie Fromer. I am from a group called Repair Cafe Hudson Valley, and we're a consortium of repair cafes in the Hudson Valley area, but also the Catskills and the Capital region, because it keeps spreading and we can never say no to anyone. So that's sort of who we are. And so the Zoom is tonight. Our fiscal sponsor is Sustainable Hudson Valley, and they are putting on this week of climate events in the Hudson Valley called HV Climate Solutions Week. And so I was happy to put this on as part of that because we're all trying to do our part for the climate. So cafes are a really lovely way to fight climate change, and everyone is volunteer run, and there's just a lot of enthusiasm for it, and there's a lot of people helping other people start cafes, and so everyone was very amenable and agreed to be on this Zoom, and I really appreciate everyone's taking the time to do this. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with my little bit, which is, I've got a lot of stuff here to share. Let me find the right one. Here. So here's my little bit. Okay. All right. So this is just, the opening Zoom. Let me just move everybody so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Excellent. All right. So where did Repair Cafe Hudson Valley come from? And Repair Cafes, if anyone doesn't know, started in Amsterdam in 2009. Martina Postma was an environmental journalist and had this concept of a repair cafe. And there was an article in the New York Times, I think it was about 2012, and John Wackman, who was a board member at that time of Sustainable Hudson Valley, brought it to Melissa Everett, who's the chair of Sustainable Hudson Valley. And he started the first repair cafe in this area in New Paltz in 2013. And so now we've had 10 years of repair cafes in this area, which is it's pretty amazing. And it just, like I said, has continued to grow from the one in New Paltz. And now we have a lot. I'm going to get to that. We have, oops, it's not, there we go. We have about 53, I think, at this point, which is just an incredible growth. So just a quick overview. What is a repair cafe? It's a free community event where things get fixed. Each cafe is locally run. So even though I support all these cafes, each one has its own mandate, their own, they're all run by volunteers. Everyone is run by a different group. And repair cafes build community and serve as a town square for neighbors to come together. It's a really nice social thing, especially after COVID. It's a really nice way for people to be together. The other things that repair cafes do are reduce waste. They preserve repair skills. They show people with the repair skills that they're valued. They feed our curiosity about how things work. They foster community. And you'll see this, if not a theme tonight, if you go to cafes, they're really happy places. Everyone's happy to be there. How do they help the environment? So just a quick, by the numbers, in our little group here, we had 69 different cafes last year. Each one has about an average of 40 guests. Each guest brings an average of 1 to 2 items, and about 75% are fixed. So that math came out to 3,000 items kept out of the landfill last year. And then additional things are fixed after cafes with parts given or advice. Parts told, sometimes I'll see someone actually help you order it on Amazon, or you're told what part to get and then given advice, and you can fix it either at home or you come back to a cafe. And then in addition, more things are fixed at home next time with the advice given in. And so in our network alone, we have 123 this year, up from 69. So you can the growth is just phenomenal. Okay, so this just shows a quick map of our cafes. It's all in New York, all along the Hudson Valley, but really spreads both directions. And this is, we have 8 near Albany and all these different counties. I live down in Westchester. We have 11 down here, and then it just continues to grow. Sorry, this does not like to be. Okay, so then again, this is just a quick list of our cafes by county or by region. We call the Capital Region one region because there's so many counties that come together there. Okay, and then just where our cafes held, and I know a lot of people are going to talk about more specifics, but just this is some of our many spaces. One is in a maker space, one is a lot of churches host them, community centers. One of them is at a firehouse. It's actually a great space, especially with COVID. You could open the doors and have some real ventilation and light. I mean, honestly, that was fabulous. A nonprofit and libraries. And we're going to talk, two of our guests are going to talk a lot about libraries as spaces to host. And then just, we talk about the fixers, of course, but there are a lot of other volunteer roles that are important at cafes. The organizers are the people who bring the whole thing together, but then you need physical setup and breakdown. You need people to run the check-in table. It's actually extremely important to keep things orderly and to know who's next. And runners, that's another position that you go back and forth between the check-in table and the fixers to see whose turn, and this really helps run smooth. Sometimes we need translators. We'll have some communities are much more Spanish speaking, and a translator really helps it be accessible. We often bakers and cooks because we are all volunteer run and there are no funds to run anything. So we both have to feed our volunteers lunch, but we also have snacks. That's part of the whole cafe concept, is this hospitality. So there's always coffee and tea, and then something like a baked good, except for the height of COVID, there's always a little snack. And then of course the repair coaches. And just a real general, what stations are there at a repair cafe? And I'm going to send all kinds of follow-up information to anyone who wants it. But just to give you a quick glance, electrical is the most popular station. And what that usually means is lamps. Lamps is the #1 item fixed in America. Apparently at repair cafes in Europe, it's coffee makers. It's just different. And so, and vacuums come up a lot. So those are the electrical. This is mechanical, right? Which is, and I'm a jewelry fixer, so a lot of this stuff is just kind of new to me in terms of it, but these are more mechanical things. There's no electricity run through it, but it still has to be something that gets put together. Textiles or sewing, that's a very, very common one. These are usually at every cafe. There's somebody who does all these 3 items. And then jewelry and watches. We really try to have that. And some cafes, when there isn't a presence for it, it's less popular. But once people know about it, especially for costume jewelry, which is really expensive to fix otherwise, it's very popular. Woodworking is a very big one. We have a lot of woodworkers in our network. And sometimes we'll have a computer person that's really helpful. Sometimes it can be for advice for software. Sometimes it can be for hardware. Bike repair is another really big one. And sometimes we really try to have knife sharpening that comes, it's very requested. So knife sharpening is a nice thing to have. And gluing. Sometimes we'll have a separate glue. And then just what else might be at a cafe? Typically, like I said, snacks if you can. Sometimes you could have an information table. In other words, if someone wants to come from your town board and talk about the rulings or how you can get past the architectural board, like whatever people want to do, that's very valuable. Composting, recycling info is popular. We've had master gardeners come and give advice. A kids table, something like a take it apart table where they play with things and we encourage learning. How things work. Music can be common, just not too loud. I will say that because the space is too loud. And then specialty fixers. We have a welder. We have someone who does photo restoration. And I was just speaking to some of the ladies before we started. One of our cafes is in Manor, and they're doing it at the fly fishing museum. And so they've had at both of their cafes people who will fix your fly fishing equipment. So very specialized things by area. Yeah. Box. And then just some pictures of just some of the fixes. The one in the middle was done at a maker's space. And so if you can see what the leg on the left, that's a lighter color, hasn't been stained yet, but it was missing that leg. And they actually were able to make a new leg at the maker space. That's a really special kind of thing to do. And this clock was very, very complex on the right. Some earrings. We have a few clock fixers, really specialized. It's really kind of a lost art. So that's very amazing. On the left here is one of our organizers. He's actually fixing screens, and I've seen other people fix screen doors at cafes, and this was a little toy that they fixed. I mean, electrical, they can fix anything. It's pretty amazing. And I just wanted to add, for anyone who's from New York State, repair cafes earn you climate smart community points, and that has become a very important reason to add one to your town, because it helps you get points, and the points then earn you money and recognition for being a climate smart community. So that's one of the reasons a lot of people want to hold them in New York. And then this is my contact information, which again, I will send around, but happy to, I'm always happy to talk to anyone about cafes, even if you're not in our network. I'm happy to send you some resources and just, support you or put you in touch with anyone I know in that area, because we're just really happy to see this movement grow. So I'm going to now throw it to Don Fick, who is here, and he is from Repair Cafe, North Carolina. He's the founder down there, and it is another consortium, a group of multiple cafes in a much more populous region, in a city region. So I'm gonna mute myself and
Thank you, Suzie. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's great to see so many unfamiliar names on the participant list. So welcome to the Repair Cafe movement. I'm glad you're all here. And so it's my pleasure to speak a little bit about how do we recruit and retain volunteers. And so I'm going to take you through this little slideshow here. When we talk about volunteers, we're talking about a variety of different roles. Suzie has touched on a number of them. I like to refer to our fixers as repair coaches. We like to see our repair activities be very collaborative. And so the coach is guiding, supporting, mentoring, explaining, demonstrating, guiding people through a repair process. Those coaches are generally doing a lot of the work, if not all of it. That is true. But in the process, there's a conversation happening. There's knowledge being shared. There's stories being told. So we have, as Suzie mentioned, repair coaches in a variety of different areas. Certainly electrical, mechanical, those are the two big ones. We've got certainly furniture, woodworking kind of repairs, electronics. Definitely we do occasionally see things where we've got to pull out the soldering iron and work on circuit boards and higher technology products. Specialty areas, interestingly, sewing machines is an area that maybe is kind of a niche. A lot of people will run away from a sewing machine while they're very happy to maybe change the alternator on a car. So sewing machines are kind of a whole category unto themselves. Likewise, vintage electronics like tube radios and then bicycles are very often kind of a niche thing where you may need to seek out volunteers who are knowledgeable in those areas, maybe not skills that are generally available. But those aren't the only jobs. And I want to emphasize that we've got a lot of other folks who are doing things. So there's, certainly pre-event activities, people doing marketing, doing outreach, social media. We've got record keeping. So there's a lot of tracking of activities both before and after an event. So there's opportunities for people to step forward and be involved, even if they're not coaches. And I would say that in my experience, this is actually kind of the tougher category to recruit for, because people are thinking of Repair Cafe, they're thinking of the repair activity and not maybe giving a lot of thought to all of the support work that goes on behind the scenes. Even evenings like this, where we're sitting around talking about it, this takes time, effort, planning. That's a big section, a big chunk of work that needs to be done. And so communications as well. How do we connect with people, whether by email or online or by telephone? You need to be prepared to devote some time to that. Inside the event, we have our registration checkout table. Here we've got a couple smiling faces working behind the desk. This is where you're going to be greeting people when they first arrive at a Repair Cafe, asking them to fill out the waiver forms, capturing their names and contact information. Facilitator, or as Suzie described, as a runner. These are people principally, maybe yourself as the organizer, working as a liaison between the coaches and the guests, matching people up based on their skill areas and their needs. We also like to have a photographer on hand, somebody who can capture the little victories that are occurring around the room. And hospitality, we do call it Repair Cafe. And so there is often a table of food. And how does that food get there? So Suzie mentioned, having bakers, having volunteers who can bring in that food. Our group in Asheville is often turns to the guests themselves and asks them to bring along a baked item while they're there to have something fixed. So there's lots of different ways to solve the hospitality challenge, but it is an important one because it helps keep our volunteers happy. I want to mention diversity and how do we create an inclusive environment for our volunteers. And this is really important. I think we can think of that in terms of the kinds of skills and interests and backgrounds that are going to be most successful for us in a Repair Cafe are going to be those volunteers that represent the community they're coming from and serving, right? The skills that we need to support the community are most likely found in that community. I think in our Asheville group, working in Hendersonville nearby, they were working on a farm. They're getting a lot of gardening equipment and the kinds of tools that are, kind of common in that region. Whereas if we're working in a town like Raleigh, you're going to see a much more urban focus in the kinds of products and things that are coming in. And the skill set of the people there are different. They're not going to be nearly as agricultural. So give some consideration to how you build a diverse volunteer group so that it really can kind of serve the needs of the guests that you have coming in. I want to talk a little bit about what kind of motivates these volunteers to be there. There's not any just one type of volunteer. They span different ages, different backgrounds. We cannot assume that they're all coming in with an environmental objective. They're not all there to solve climate change. They're not all there to pursue a particular political perspective. And in fact, I would recommend that you avoid discussions of politics completely. You don't know where your volunteers are coming from, if they're Democrats, Republicans, or other things. So partisan politics should not ever be part of Repair Cafe. Some are there to promote kind of skill sharing. They are perhaps, older with a lifetime of experience. They want to share that with the next generation coming up. People are often simply interested in meeting their neighbors and engaging with the community. And fellowship is an important part. A lot of our volunteers enjoy the time they have to share with each other and to talk amongst each other. And one of the things we always do in one of our Repair Cafe events is create a time, half an hour to an hour before the event opens its doors, where the volunteers can talk amongst themselves, catch up since the last time they saw each other, share their own repair stories, and enjoy each other's company. There's a lot of story listening and storytelling that occurs. A lot of our guests come in, the items that they have a lot of significance and history to them. And so sometimes we can't fix them, but we can always be a receptive ear and listen to those stories and appreciate the legacy that those items carry with them. And most of all, we want to have fun, right? This is not meant to be a chore. Yes, we hope to be able to do good and valuable work, but most of all, we want to go out with a smile on our face at the end of the day. Things that are really going to kind of demotivate your volunteers, and in particular, I'm thinking about our coaches, but your front desk staff, really anyone, dealing with distracted or disengaged guests. So make sure you set the expectation that your guests are going to put their phones away. They're going to be present and engaged in the conversation about repair. They shouldn't be wandering around the room. They should be sitting present with the repair coach working on the item. We want to make sure that coaches are not being given tasks that are outside of their comfort area. They can be kind of discouraged if they find the work to be too frustrating or too kind of far outside of their skill set. One of the things that's come up recently in some of my discussions is that we occasionally get people who bring in items that they've found or purchased from a thrift store knowing that they were broken, hoping to come to us to get them fixed. Or they bring them to us broken with the objective of simply donating it at the end of the day to a thrift store or someplace else. And that can be discouraging to a repair coach, because I think a big part of what we do is help people prolong the useful life of items that are important to them, items that have value, they've ceased working, they want to restore their functionality and continue to enjoy them. And as I mentioned, those stories, that legacy that's attached to an item is really important. So we want to know that repair is part of an enduring relationship that you have with your item, and not simply a transaction to get an item cheap or to be able to, donate an item at a full market value. We really want people to value the custodial duties that they have to their items that their ownership entails. Impractical and unpleasant repairs, we have kind of learned the hard way that we have to have certain restrictions on the kinds of products. I know for sure that I've lost at least one coach when I asked him to repair someone's electric toothbrush. It is just kind of gross. So give some thought to, kind of having some boundaries and the kinds of items that you're even willing to accept for repair, so that you're not putting in front of your coaches a product that just is inappropriate for the setting that we're working in. Likewise, an item that may take the entire afternoon to fix is probably not a suitable item for Repair Cafe. And as I mentioned, avoiding politics. Sometimes we get some folks who, are kind of wound up about certain perspectives, legislation, and things, but our coaches are coming from all different backgrounds, and it's just really not necessary to be a part of what we're doing. So when it comes to recruiting volunteers, if you build it, they will come. And, being near Durham, North Carolina, I can quote Kevin Costner movies. And so one of the things you want to do is begin capturing leads from day one. You're setting up a website, you're setting up a social media presence. Be prepared to recruit volunteers. And it's important to recognize that a lot of your classic coaches, as I mentioned, kind of people who are older, maybe with a lifetime of experience they're prepared to share, they're not on social media. So you got to be prepared to meet them where they are. They're going to be more comfortable maybe using email, using filling out forms on websites are going to be much more common, as well as just direct phone calls. So be prepared to capture those inquiries. I use Squarespace for our website. It costs about $20 a month, but they have some great forms that pipe me emails. And basically, every few days I'm getting an inquiry from someone through those web forms. Reach out to similar organizations where you can find some kindred spirits, maker spaces, tool libraries, ham radio clubs. I know multiple of our coaches in the Durham area know each other from outside by their call signs. We've got Facebook groups where you can promote what you're doing. You may find sympathetic ears in places like buy sell trade groups or free cycle style groups. Bicycle co-ops are another place where some of our coaches have come from, as well as sewing clubs. We find that in the sewing community, there's a tremendous affinity people have for the work they do, the hobby they share, and there's a really strong network there if you can tap into it. Be prepared to have a phone call. So people inquire about being a coach, pick up the phone, have a 15 to 20-minute call with them. On one level, you're screening them to make sure they're the kind of volunteer you want to have, but it also gives you a chance to kind of frame their expectations a bit so that they know what they're getting involved in. Make sure that they understand what the aims of the program are, and you can brief them a little bit on the tools they should bring based on their area of interest. You get to know them a little bit on that phone call, and then when you meet them in person, you can kind of greet them, understand where they're coming from, and have some familiarity with them. We use online tools a lot to manage things because we all have day jobs, and so we need to be able to do this asynchronously. So I find Evite is really good for helping to manage who's coming, sending out invites to volunteers, this is, not to our guests, and keeping track of their RSVPs so that I know, looking ahead to this coming Saturday, I can tell you with a fair certainty that how many people I have coming in to volunteer. Eventbrite is another tool, and there are many other kinds of online sign-up tools. When they get there, be sure to greet them, welcome them, make them feel comfortable, explain the whole flow of the day for them so they know what to expect. And then I usually partner new coaches with an existing coach in sort of a mentor relationship so they can kind of see how it goes the first day. They can understand the kinds of conversations we have and the tools that are available and so forth. When it comes to volunteer retention, I think that's our number one goal, because as an organizer, you really can't do anything if you don't have the people behind you. And when you fail to show appreciation for the time and talent that they're providing to you, you're going to lose them. And if you lose them, you're done. So some of the things that we do to show gratitude, we share kudos, we share food. Here's some examples of the kind of messages that I share with our coaches at the end of the day. We put out an email after the event, kind of a little synopsis. How did we do? What did we see? What kind of special stories came out of it? And in our registration forms, we have a space at the bottom for remarks. When people sign out after their visit, they can leave a few remarks. I copy that into an email message and send it out to everybody. And these are examples of real messages that were written down on paper. And of course, make sure we have food. We need to keep those volunteers hydrated. And celebrate. Every success is an opportunity to take a photo, take a moment out and congratulate everybody on their success. There's really kind of a sense of almost euphoria that occurs in a repair cafe that's really different from anything else you'll see. in a other kind of group. There's this kind of victory, this triumph, then it pervades the room. And so definitely, celebrate that and make sure it's recognized. And then we like to kind of promote some solidarity among our coaches, some recognition. So here you see a recent photo of our group working in Cary, North Carolina. We provide aprons for everybody to wear at the day of the event. These are really inexpensive polyester aprons. You get at Amazon for, I think it was something on the order of $20 for a pack of 12. But one size fits all. And, everybody kind of has an appearance of being kind of their present part of the team. It also allows our guests to know who is a volunteer and who is not. And then my policy is after 3 events, you get a name badge. And then name badge is there for you to wear every time you come back. So it's just kind of a nice way to give a little added recognition to the loyalty that your volunteers have. Make sure you communicate with them. It's not just in the event, but afterwards, maybe set up a Google group, share some messages to them as you in the lead up to an event. Make sure you're keeping engaged with them. The frequency of events is variable. Some groups can only do 2 a year, others may do 12 a year, but making sure that you're still present in the minds of your volunteers during those off periods is important to keeping them engaged. And so, yeah, Google Group is probably the easiest way, but there are other email providers out there. So just always be recruiting, always be out there receptive to the idea that you're going to need to bring on new volunteers, especially as there is some attrition, you're going to lose volunteers. These slides are available. You can download them at that URL or pull out your phone and hit that QR code and you can have those slides as a PDF. So I think Suzie is the model here. We're going to do is questions at the end or questions now. How do we want to do that?
Okay, sorry, I am not muted. Okay, questions at the end. I think what
Okay.
we'll do, but I think that we will also, the 4 of us can respond to anyone's comments before we open it up to the main audience, if any 5 of the speakers, if we want to address something, just so we feel like a rebuttal or just to add on to that. Thank you. That was excellent. I really appreciate you joining us. When I started in this position only a year ago, and one of the first people I was told about was Don and all the work that he's doing down there in North Carolina. So I'm very honored that you were here, and that was really helpful. I would say that getting volunteers, both the coaches, probably the coaches, but I don't think people understand how many other volunteers are needed, is one of the hardest things that people struggle with. So that was a really good in-depth discussion, because that's one of the main questions I get asked for sure. So, okay, let me do this. All right, so next we are going to have Bea Echeverria, and she is from Evanston Repair Cafe. She's the founder and organizer of that, and that one is at the public library. So I thought that was a nice tie-in. Not only is it in different side of the country, but also it is at a library, and that's a different process. So I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to advance her slides for her.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for coming, and I'm here to talk a little bit about different things. One of them, so again, one of the, I started the Repair Cafe by myself when I arrived in Evanston, and I had nobody. So going from that to having it at a library, I think it's something that is valuable to see the difference. So when I'm here, one of the things I'm here to talk about is the advantages of having it at a library. I think I remember some of the things, so I'll just kind of start talking. I think there's some pros of having it at a library. First of all, you don't have to worry a lot about resources, because they're usually something that they're given to you. Also, promoting is relatively easy, right? So yeah, so it's easy to promote and easier to find volunteers, because you get the library to kind of help you in the promotion via the newsletters or other events. Also, a particular thing in Evanston is that the public library is part of the city. So there's I don't know how it goes, but it's really connected to the city. So we also get their newsletters to to help us promote and find volunteers. Another issue that is solved by being part of the library is the certificate of insurance, because that's taken care of by the library because it's at the library space, which is something that when I tried to have events happen somewhere else, I had to make sure that we had the certificate of insurance from the library to this other venue. So that's something that we're lucky to have. The venue, in our case, we're in a branch that's really, it's new. So our event is at the lobby. It's a very wide space, very open. We have 2 ice rinks right next to us. So people that are going into the ice can take a look at who we are and what we're doing. Also, people that are going into the library just to check out the library or check out books have to go by us. So that makes it interesting, and it's very bright, which is something that the volunteers always ask for. Light, a lot of light. So in that aspect, it's very, very good. Again, another advantage is that having the library behind us, it's easier for us to have synergies with other organizations. We can always say hi. We're, the Repair Cafe, in case they don't know what that is. We can always say, oh, this is a public library event, and then some people makes them feel more assured, or they want to collaborate with you because you're a way into the library, kind of. So, and then in our case, for example, one of our Tuesday events is done at the same time as a food pantry event. So the people that are attending the food pantry can also use our service. It's like a 2-in-1. When they come to get their food, they can also get something repaired. And but some of the cons on the other side is, I think we lose a little bit of charm and character because we have to kind of abide by the rules of the library, and we cannot be so have our own personality. In some aspects, we have to be more strict. We also depend for the library and certain things that we might want to improvise. For example, food. You guys are talking a lot about food. For us, we cannot allow baked goods at home. It has to be items bought. So that kind of takes the appeal of like asking people to bring their own items or having a baker. We cannot do that. Then also the idea of the mandatory waivers. We actually are co-sponsored by another organization, Climate Action Evanston. So we have 2 waivers. So everybody has to sign 2 waivers, which is something that people don't like. But those waivers, especially the library waiver, is a little bit, sometimes the stipulations are a little bit more complex because we have to cover so many things, right? And then sometimes people have higher expectations because you're a library and you are providing a service and you are being paid with by their tax dollars and all a certain set of things that people are like, well, but you, and you're like, really? So it's hard sometimes to navigate how you can make people understand that even though it is a library event, everybody that there is a volunteer except for me. So you cannot, have such high expectations of repairability or how many items you can bring. Those things sometimes we have to explain. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, another of the things I have to talk about is the advantage of, or why, like, the Evanston Repair Cafe being a city cafe. Evanston has, I think it's like 80,000 residents. So I think seeing other repair cafes, I think there's like 3 types. It's like the city versus the town versus the neighborhood. There's, for example, Community Glue is a repair cafe or repair cafe type of event that happens at a neighborhood in Chicago, and they have a very, very, very particular personality. And so I just want to note that there's like not only big city, small city, or big town, small town, there's also like the neighborhood repair cafes, which I think is a wonderful thing. It would be lovely to have more of those, like kind of popping up, very informal, right? But anyway, as a city repair cafe, I think it's important that we reach all the communities in our city. Evanston has it's a very diverse demographic. So we have to make sure that we address, that we reach out to people in the way that each group needs to go, is used to being reached out. So as somebody said, Don said, I'm sorry. I don't remember who said it, but not everybody is on social media, but not even everybody receives things by email. A lot of people want like regular mail, or only like newsletters and don't like or like the Roundtable, which used to be our paper newspaper. So knowing who, for example, the Latino community likes a lot using text. It's more agile, it's on their cell phone. So that doesn't mean I'm using that, because it's not, I don't have that technology available, but it's something that I noticed that should happen and it's not happening. Another good idea about a city cafe is having maybe registrations versus walk-ins, because you get more people. Sometimes they're busier, or they have, again, those expectations. They don't only come to chat with you, they also want their stuff fixed. So the idea of having registrations helps to make it more even and for everybody to know what's coming. Again, have clear expectations. You have people of all walks of life. Some people, we do have sometimes people that are in a situation of either homelessness due to mental health issues. So sometimes we have to also be clear to these people to what we can and cannot fix. Sometimes we get like electrical blankets. We cannot fix your electrical blankets. And I understand a patron might get upset, but they have to understand why we can do things and why we can't. So again, it's a range of people that you might be getting, or their expectations, that I think makes it City Cafe a little bit different. As Don was saying before, I mean, Suzie, the translation, sometimes you need, in my case, I speak Spanish, so I'm like 2 in 1. And then notice every once in a while, just make sure that we notice who we are reaching and who we are not reaching and why we're not reaching them. So in our case, sometimes we see like the demographics of the Repair Cafe don't match the demographics of the city. So that's something that we have to understand where we're missing as a library or as a Repair Cafe. And then the next slide. Thank you. So a little bit of the other thing that I was here to talk about is the idea of why to have it registration versus walk-ins. Unlike Dawn, I use Sign Up Genius. It's not perfect, but works for me. So again, I just gave you a couple of screenshots so you have an idea of what we're doing. You can also scan it and see a live one. So the good thing for me about having registrations is that you can allow, I mean, you can set the expectations and clarify most of the questions that people are going to have. As you can see here, there's like a part of the explanation of what the Repair Cafe is, where it's being held, what time, what you can bring. And then if you go to the next slide, Suzie, please. You can also, people sign up so you can see who they are, what they're bringing, make a model, the problem that the item has, and you also have a space for them to write their contact information. So if you have any issues, you can always contact them prior to the event saying, okay, if you're going to bring this, please make sure that, I don't know, if it's, I don't know, if it's a lamp and you know it needs rewiring, we don't have the wires, so make sure you bring your purchase. And if they don't know what they have to purchase, we can always go via email go back and forth. And also, as you can see, we have the time, so people do come at their time and they understand that then they have that much amount of time. So it's 45 minutes for us to help them. Again, we have 2 types of events. We have the Saturday one, which is 45 minutes per participant. And then we do 2 Tuesdays per month, which we have a whole hour per participant for maybe. We also do this for the same reason that I was talking before. Some people cannot come on a Saturday. They can come maybe on a Tuesday because whatever, maybe they work on Saturdays, or maybe they don't have anybody to bring them on a Saturday, whereas maybe they do have on a Tuesday, or they feel more comfortable. They don't want to be around so many people. So trying to address the different needs of the people in the community. Next slide, and I think it's the last one, I think. Oh yes, and then there's like the back side of Sign Up Genius, which tells me all the information I need. And my volunteers also have access to this. So they can see what people are bringing, and they might contact me and say, hey, Bea, can you ask them about this? Or just let them know that we can't fix this other thing. It also helps me because sometimes people sign up for 2 or 3 items and we can only allow 1 slot per person. They can bring as many things within that type of category that they want, but it's only 1 per person, because if not, sometimes we get people like signing up for 3, like sewing, jewelry, and electronics, and it's taking up the opportunity for other people to sign up. But it's also, as both Don and Susie were mentioning, volunteers also like to be with each other and maybe collaborate. Some repairs are fun, in which they do have 2 or 3, even 3 volunteers working together, and they have a blast. And as Don was saying, I think for me, the most valuable thing is the volunteers, and that they enjoy their time is critical. So I think that also helps me, the fact that I can see who's coming. Again, we also allow walk-ins, and we do get walk-ins, and we usually can accommodate, I think 90, maybe I've had to say no to 2 people in the last 2 years, but most of the time we have space for everybody, but the registration helps. So I think that's all my part. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Again, I would add that the most valuable thing is the coaches, and having all those people with all those diverse skills in one room is kind of an amazing, and sometimes they do come together to work on things in ways, and it's pretty incredible to see that. I agree. All right, thank you so much. That was it's very different, because what we have is a bunch of neighborhood cafes. So it's so interesting to hear a different perspective. And that has its challenges too, because we have so many neighborhood cafes now. We're starting to bump up on each other, and it gets harder to get coaches. Okay, next we have Elizabeth Knight Moss. And she was one of our founders and organizers. She was the original organizer, a founder of the Warwick Cafe, which is in Orange County in our network. And she's also the co-author of Repair Revolution, which we haven't talked about yet. She's going to, I know. And that is basically, it was co-written with Elizabeth and John Wackman, who I talked about. And it is sort of the guidebook for how to start a repair cafe, and has a chapter in it about how to start a repair cafe. So that is one of the first pieces of information I give out. So I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth. I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to share her screen as well.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you, Susie. So one of the differences between starting a repair cafe in Warwick, New York, which is a semi-rural area about an hour and a half north of New York City, and downtown Jersey City, where there is a totally different audience, and it's across the Hudson River from New York City, means that both the pool of volunteers and the pool of attendees is different, very different. Jersey City is much younger, and they're much more occupied with work and with family. All right, we had Suzie had talked to us about who was the founder of the Repair Cafe. Martine Postma, as Suzie had said, was a journalist. And she, oops, could we go back, Suzie? Right here, thank you. She started the Repair Cafe because she said after the birth of her second child, she walked out on the sidewalk one day and saw a bunch of things kicked to the curb, and went over to take a closer look and thought, most of this stuff is not trash, it can be fixed. So she went to a friend who owned a movie theater in Amsterdam in the Netherlands and asked him to let her borrow the lobby as a one-off. And she contacted a number of people that she knew who knew how to fix things, invited them to come. And now there are almost 3,000 repair cafes in 34 countries, and about 150 in the US. Next slide, please. And John and his partner, Holly Shader, actually went to Amsterdam and volunteered their services at a cafe and worked with Martina. And Martina was very, very much like most of us, really bereft after John had gone, but his work and his inspiration live on. Next slide, please. So why we do it? We've talked about this, but basically the idea is to reduce how much stuff goes to the waste stream, transform the throwaway society, preserve repair know-how and skills, and pass them along. That's one of the things that brings the coaches back. They love being able to work with, like Fred Rossi in the Warwick Cafe has actually teaching a high school boy who wanted to know how to sharpen knives, had him sit with him and work with him, and even had a private session. And now the young boy is going to be working at the next cafe. And it's also a way of showing people who have this hands-on knowledge that they're valued. It's to feed our curiosity about the way things work. And when I started the Repair Cafe in Warwick, I had called John and he said, you think you're going to keep things out of the landfill, Elizabeth, and you will. He said, but it's the individual who's not the real problem. It's the larger manufacturers who have no system for repurposing, reusing, or you were encouraged before the right to repair laws are beginning to pass, don't fix it, just buy another one. He said, what you don't yet know is you're going to be building community. And I thought, what is he talking about? And you see it happen in front of your face the very first time. Next slide, please. The young boy holding the blue shirt was a volunteer from one of the local churches, and he needed community service hours to receive the confirmation, the sacrament of confirmation. He was what you might call a runner and a greeter. His dad came in and brought the shirts to be fixed one day, and Ethan said, when I'd asked him what his experiences were like, he had volunteered for almost a year. This is a direct quote. "It's nice to know that with the news saying so many sad stories, there's a place where people who are willing to help you, no matter who you are, for no other reason than to help you in the best way possible. It gives me hope." This is from a 13-year-old boy. And then the photograph of the two women, one of them had helped the other, the owner, glue the handle back on her mug. And she said, the coach had said later, sometimes even if the glue doesn't hold, the real glue is the connecting with another person. And as Dawn was saying, helping them fix something that matters to them. Next slide, please. So one of the things when you get ready to start a repair cafe is to look for partners or sponsors. And it doesn't have to be sponsors as in the sense that they'll write you a check, but people who will help you spread the word. Like Bea was telling us, a library is a great place to start a repair cafe because they already have a built-in system for helping to promote it. And it's already a public place where people go to get answers and solutions to things. But there are many other organizations such as these. This was just a group that was trying to start a repair cafe in southeastern Ohio. May I have the next slide, please? In New York State, we've also contacted with the Department of Environmental Conservation, and they were so in tune with what we were trying to accomplish with repair cafes that they were including information about repair cafes in their solid waste and recycling newsletter. So government sponsors with this kind of attention can be a big help to you. Next slide, please. When I was starting one in Warwick, I went to the local sustainability club, of which I was a member, and presented the idea about starting a repair cafe. And they thought that it fit in with their mission. And one of the issues that I had was, where am I getting volunteers? I was fairly new to the community. I had been reaching out to school groups, veterans, retirees, and I was getting nowhere. I put notices on the Sustainable Warwick's website. I used their mailing list. And finally, I went to the mayor of the town because his family owned a home furnishings gift store, and said, I'm not getting anywhere with this. You know how the newspaper runs a photo of you with a big pair of fake scissors cutting a ribbon across the front of a building to introduce a new business like a restaurant or a hair salon. Will you come with me and with members of the volunteer team to have a photo taken? And he said, absolutely. Call the Chamber of Commerce. They will set up the photography and make sure that the trustees and the county legislators would be invited. And the mayor said to me, and be sure you have each of your coaches hold an item. There was a lamp, an iPad, and a wooden toy. Once that ran in the paper, with the note, with the quote from the mayor about what a good idea this was for the community, my phone began to ring off the hook to get volunteers. Next slide, please. So we've been talking about the kinds of places where repair cafes are held. Libraries, public facilities. Ours was held at the Warwick Town Hall. Houses of worship. The photograph in New Paltz, the woman at the greeting station, happens to be the preacher there. The security solid waste management system. Gritworks is a co-working space in Newburgh, New York. High school shop classrooms. We've even seen them held in not just senior centers. We did a pop-up repair cafe during a Christmas market for things that had been made with recycled and upcycled items. So think a little bigger than the facility. But one of the things that's important about the facility that I learned the hard way, the first place I held a repair cafe in Warwick was in the basement level of an old school. The parking lot wasn't big enough. It was a set of stairs to go downstairs to 3 rooms that had separate doors. The restrooms and water fountains were on another floor. That was a problem. So I contacted the town clerk and said, may we use the senior center? And I was surprised to learn that, yes, we could use the senior center, but even holding a book club in the senior center required a certificate of insurance on file with the town clerk. One of the things that's really important is that the location where you're holding your repair cafe thinks enough about what you're doing that they will help you facilitate getting insurance if you need it, or they themselves hold insurance, as in the library. So I had to go back to Sustainable Warwick to go to them to secure the insurance. And when all of that changed, I had to go back to Sustainable Hudson Valley. Okay, next slide, please. So as Bea was telling you, libraries are a natural repair cafe hosts. The next couple of slides are part of a presentation that I was invited to make to the New Jersey Library Association with the head of the Ridgewood Library, who hosts the Repair Cafe. And as she says, the mission is to educate and empower people. It's a community center, all ages and resources. It's a trusted institution, an information source, volunteer hub, organizational partnership, and a library of things. And in a number of repair cafes that are either held in libraries or next door to libraries, we'll put out an array of books that have to do with how do you fix things. Next slide, please. We had heard about the Children's Take It Apart Center, and that's in keeping with not just the library program, but kids love the hands-on experience. We had a woman bring in a hairdryer one day, and after the repair coach looked at it and said, this one's dead and done. And she said, okay, well, where's the recycle bin, and I'll toss it. And he said, no, take it to the Kids Take It Apart table, which is run by the dad in the black shirt with his back to you. And he had his 4-year-old and 6-year-old there. He cut off the plug. We had a whole collection of little tiny screwdrivers and hand tools, kid size. And he had a whole list of things that we decided would be safe for the children to work on. Obviously not things like a microwave, but there's a whole appendix in the book, Repair Revolution, about what he suggests would be great for the kids. The kids just love it. One woman told me that her 4-year-old son, she had taken apart a vacuum cleaner by the time she got down to make coffee in the morning. And she said, he usually can't sit still, but when I bring him to the repair cafe, even though mom didn't need anything fixed, she said he stays the entire time. May I have a next slide, please? And it doesn't have to be a full-on repair cafe. When I was trying to start the repair cafe in Warwick, the library director and I went down to look at the space, the community meeting room, and we both agreed that that wasn't an ideal space to hold a repair cafe with all the different setup stations and the electrical outlets that we were going to need. But she said the library would be willing to help promote it. So every time we had a repair cafe, they would put up a flyer. They would make a display of books about doing your own repairs, and they would let their newsletter list included in the information about the repair cafe. But you can do a pop-up event. In Ridgewood, they did a jewelry-only repair cafe. And in Warwick, we did a series of 3 different one-off repair cafes. This one is Mending Matters and Textiles, but we also had a bike safety check And when we had a knife sharpening with a whetstone, the coaches taught people how to take apart a pair of scissors so you could sharpen the edge. They worked with garden tools. And one man actually insisted, after the scissors had been sharpened, he asked the coach to trim the back of his hair. May I have the next slide? Then there is the Library of Things. When I was in Warwick, I discovered that the library not 6 miles down the road was going to be the first library in the entire Hudson Valley to offer a library of things, which is sometimes called a tool library. The idea was, as somebody put it, you don't need a 3/4 inch drill, you need a 3/4 inch hole. You could borrow the drill, you could borrow the hammer, you can borrow a KitchenAid, you can borrow the candy making equipment. But those libraries, it's like a hand-on version. You don't need just the book. And when I went to talk to the library and said, no, we have people from your town coming to our repair cafe, is the tool library going to be open to anyone who doesn't live in the Village of Florida? Well, they'd have to go back to their board. The board said yes. And I said, because we can help cross promote. We can send people who come to our repair cafe to your library of things. We'll hand out information about it. And our coaches will come do pop-off one-off demos at your library to help promote your tool library. It was a big success. So you're not limited by, if I don't have a huge space with a ramp to carry things in, if I don't have wheelchair access, you can still be in the repair, quote, business by picking an aspect that works for your location, the physical location, and your audience. Next slide, please. As Suzie said, there is a lot more information in Repair Revolution. The appendixes include what kinds of tools should you have to do electrical repairs? What do you need, and what are you really looking for in a physical space? An appendix, as I said, about what you need to have for children to work with, and a lot more just information collected from people who were running repair cafes across the country. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. The book is available. See if your library has a copy of it, and they can get one from New World Library or your local independent bookstore. Thank you very much. Oh, skip that one. That's interesting. Oh, one other thing. Suzie had asked for me to talk about donations. Can we go to the next slide, Suzie?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Our repair cafe, the one after this one right here. You can see the red asterisk. It says, bring your beloved broken items, fix them for free. And then it says lamp parts available at our cost. Now that we've ordered, now that we also offer bike repairs, if we have the part, that's at our cost. Part of the issue with, as Suzie was saying at the beginning, lamps being the most common item brought in seeking a repair, sometimes people will have the part they think the lamp needs. Most of the time they don't. Sometimes even they bring the part, it's not the right thing. We can look it up online and say, this is what you need to order, bring it back to the next repair cafe, or there's a local hardware store in town, 10 minutes drive, go get the part. If you can get it back before 3 o'clock, we can work with it. We don't charge the people doing the hands-on repair. We don't charge for that. The idea is it's neighbor to neighbor, volunteer, helping you get the things that you need or love to be working again, and we don't need to be paid for that. And when I was starting the repair cafe in Warwick, someone said to me, well, aren't you afraid you're going to put the local lamp repair shop out of business? And I said, as far as I know, the nearest one is about a 40-minute drive. And I did go in and talk to the man who had his own bike repair business. And he said, lady, I've got more work than I need, and I'm gone all winter to South Florida. And I said, would you like us to put out your business cards? He said, sure. He said, but I don't need you to have me be there. He said, but you're happy to promote it. And one of the ways that I got a coach, someone saw an article with the photo of the mayor in the newspaper, and he lived 3 towns over. And he said, I'm a retired engineer, and I'm a handyman. I can fix most household things. Is it okay with you if I bring a flyer that says Fix-It Bob fixes this, and I'd be available when the repair cafe is not on. And I said, absolutely. We've got somebody who did, she had a very unique business. She would take old fur coats and make them into stuffed animals for people who didn't want to wear the fur coat. She has her own card and puts that out of business. Somebody else who became known as the zipper lady. People will come to her when it wasn't during the repair cafe. So that kind of cross merchandising, you've got all of their contacts too. They have a chance to present themselves and their skills, but they don't charge for it at the repair cafe. What we do ask for is please bring a box or can for a food pantry donation. Most people will walk through the door with a can of soup. Some people come in with an entire shopping bag. We also do put out a glass jar, and it says the repairs are free, but we do have expenses, flyers, pizza for the volunteers. Peter Mouey always said, if you don't have good pizza or snacks, you're not going to have the happy coaches. What we did was we would seed it with a couple of $1 and $5 bills at the head of time. And most people put something in, even if it was $1. Some people didn't put anything in. And the one that's really stunned me, 5 minutes before we were closing, somebody came in with a child's wooden rocker underneath his arm. And I said, I'm sorry, we're closing in 10 minutes. There's a band coming in. And he said, no, I just want advice. Is there anybody who can look at this for me? Yes. I sent him to Ed, who had a side gig doing repairs for the local historic society. So Ed told the gentleman what kind of glue to get and how to fix the rocker. And when the man said, well, what should I use to sand it down? And Ed looked horrified and said, well, it's your rocker. He said, but that you said it was your wife's as a child. That's the story, all those nicks and scratches and the chip paint. And the guy said, fine. So he came back with the rocker underneath his arm and he put a $20 bill in the glass jar. And I said, but we didn't fix it. He said, yeah, but now I know how to fix it myself. Thank you. So thank you.
Right, thank you. That's wonderful. I will say that where we are, we also don't charge for the repair, but we do often charge for the piece. And we charge at cost, but like lamp, it's the lamp, the lamp socket. I'm not an electrical fixer, but it's the socket. And so it's like if it's $5.50, we might round out to $6. And we really try to, and I support you cafes in this, in making a lamp parts box. We have a wonderful fixer who volunteered to help us, right? So we have a list of what you should have in that lamp parts and where to order it, but then that money has to come from somewhere. Usually we put it up in with, and then we, replenish it by charging for the piece. Exactly. I charge for watch batteries. Yeah, that's it.
And buying a used sewing machine too. We find out we're doing a lot of sewing machine repairs and we need some special tools for that.
Interesting. Yeah. One of the things we've been working on, and I know that there also is in the Repair Revolution, is lists of tools. Of what new fixers should bring and that kind of thing. Because it's easy to get that from an established fixer, but when you're talking to a new fixer, like Don was talking about having that conversation, sometimes people get a little nervous. And so I found that if we can kind of give them a list of what other people typically bring, they're a little more ready.
And also we have in the book a list of videos and demos that they said from the coaches that say, this is the one you're going to look at for how to fix X.
That's wonderful.
So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. So nice. And so Elizabeth was with for us for a long time, but we're very happy now she's with Garden State Repair Cafe. And so they do a really, or Repair Cafe Garden State, and they're really doing a nice job organizing repair cafes in New Jersey. So if anyone wants to be a New Jersey cafe, that's the people to talk to. And we work together with them. We're so happy to see that grow. And so now we're going to have Adelia Moore, and she is one of our organizers and founders from another cafe that's sort of a consortium. It's Columbia Northeast, and it's at the northeast side of Columbia County. And I know there's a little Rensselaer in there too. But again, it's 4 different towns that work together. And so they rotate between 4 towns. And that's a model we have some places in our network. And I think it's a really good model for people who are intimidated to start it on their own. And so this way now you have multiple organizers, and now you have more people to help with that, because it is a heavy lift, the organizing. If it's a big cafe, it can be a lot. So I think that's a really nice example, and I'm going to turn it over to Adelia.
All right, there I am. I mostly don't have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to talk, but I will have a few slides at the end. I could actually, I have some photos. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Well, that's fine. If you want to enable that, then I'll just start. Yeah, I think our cafe is quite different from any of the ones I've heard from because we, in two ways. One, what Suzie described, that we're 4 different towns. And 2 is that all of us are affiliated with our Climate Smart community group, which in turn is affiliated with our towns. So this is a program in New York State which incentivizes climate change mitigating activities at the town level, and it has to be sponsored by a town. So we could do it on our own, and periodically we talk about that, but in the end we feel that it's better for us to have the town affiliation. And for one thing, that includes insurance. For another thing, all the towns have agreed, although we haven't tapped into it mostly, have agreed to give us up to $100 a year in funds if we give receipts. And we're not too organized about that, but we know we can, and it's happened some. So I'm going to talk about a little bit more about what makes ours different. I'm going to talk about supplies and make a couple of comments about other things that people have said. Our events are virtually all in firehouses because all the firehouses in our small towns have community rooms. And we usually take 2 rooms, one for the sort of quieter, less messy repairs, and the other for, the lawnmowers and the tool sharpening that might spread, filings. Often we'll be outside if the weather permitting, and some of the firehouses have a pavilion. We have also used town halls, and I've had pop-ups in a farmer's market and a library, but basically we're firehouse based, and that's a very common thing in our towns. One of the big differences is that everybody is going to be driving, at least a few minutes if it's in their town, but very possibly up to a half an hour. So we have distances to cover, both in terms of getting the word out and in terms of just people getting there. We'll have a sign on a firehouse if we're allowed to. Not all the firehouses will. We have, email blasts, and every town, when it's their turn, is sort of responsible for the main getting the word out in their town, but all of us put up flyers in addition to the TV, the radio, press release in the local papers, newsletters, and so forth. But flyers turn out to be very important in our towns, at the post office, at the farmer's market, at the hairdresser, wherever people go. I just wanted to mention 2 stories that touch me about these repair cafes, and sort of our motto for our group is it's going to be great, because the first time we were terrified. We had no idea if no one would come or too many people would come. And so we just said, someone said who had one before, well, it's going to be great. So that's what we always say. And one wonderful story was a man who came in with a toaster, took an hour to be fixed by our guy who usually does lawnmowers. And he was cradling it when he left. And I said, you look so happy. He said, and he was about 85. He said, this toaster was a wedding present to my parents in 1938, and it is now fixed. And it still had that kind of fuzzy brown cord on it. And he said, today's their anniversary. So, and if I thought ahead, I would have had a photo of him. And the other story just happened recently, which is someone who was sewing. Someone came in with a backpack. She brought it to one of our sewers, and she looked at her, said, you look familiar. They were cousins who hadn't seen each other since childhood, 50 years before. So that was kind of insane. And, they had been all sorts of places in between. I would say that one of the terms to think about in terms of repair cafe is evolution, because every time I thought of a topic, I thought, well, we've really evolved from the beginning. We were very lucky in terms of tools to have a project called the Tool Shed, which is in Hudson, New York, and a volunteer from there who lives over an hour away, but comes to all our cafes, who brings a kit that he created for repair cafes. So in addition to the incredible number of tools that country fixers, and they're mostly guys, have, who can, my wife says I can fix anything. They'll bring a big bin, a big chest, 2 or 3 things that they bring in on a dolly. I mean, it's incredible what people have, and they want to bring their own stuff. So it turns out, although we worried a lot in the beginning, tools have never been an issue for us. I do ask every fixer, which is what we tend to call them, to, if they think they might share, they're worried about losing it, to put a piece of masking tape or some other way to identify, but we've never had lost tools. And ditto for supplies. I was worried about supplies at the beginning. I went to our local hardware store. It turns out the manager there is total enthusiast of this idea. He comes to everyone he can because he has to go to one that's near the shop. He made a $250 donation worth of lamp supplies. He has given us other things. One of the kinds of supplies that we don't often think of is cleaning supplies. Sometimes we cover our tables with paper, but there's a worry, and it hasn't turned out that much, but there's worry. We use the firehouse's tables or the town hall's tables. There's been worries about cleaning up after. So we do have a box for that, or if there's grease involved, you know, that kind of thing. I would say the best source and resource for what to have are the fixers themselves. And so that's, you know, once we got started, it was no longer really an issue. And well, we used the Repair Revolution when we started out. We Xeroxed pages and, you know, we appended them as PDFs. In the end, we haven't really needed to do that as much as we thought. Another kind of supply, obviously, is textiles. Again, people who sew have their own supplies. It's really not been an issue. I am someone who sews, so I did put together a box with snaps and buttons and binding tape and cord and whatnot. But again, it doesn't get used very often. One thing that does get used is scraps of fabric, because often people are looking for patches. Another kind of supply is just administrative. So, you know, name tags, and I would say our cafe is very, very big on being green. So we try to buy as little as possible. So instead of ever buying name tags, we've had people, you know, bring in old acrylic sleeves that they've had at this. Someone said they just came across a huge supply recently at a flea market or something. So we try to reuse as much as we can. We use flea market mugs and glasses for the coffee. We use cloth napkins that one person takes home and launders. We have a big water cooler rather than, you know, bottles of water. We have table signs that we've used now for 2 years over and over again. We have a box for the job tickets, and I'm going to talk about job tickets in a second. Here's a good time to just say a word about finances, because one of the things we have is, instead of a jar for donations, which we used to have, we have a bowl. Because we were starting to get a little annoyed at people who were coming in and not leaving something. But we had a real commitment to it being free. And we discussed having people pay for parts, and the group just didn't want that. So I made a bigger sign, we put a big bowl, and sure enough, you know, our donations increased. So we've gotten as much as $350 in donations at one cafe. A $20 bill is not so unusual. 5 ones are very common, but we often get more. So the main thing that hasn't been talked about, and we're not going to have a lot of time for questions if I don't talk fast, is documentation. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about that. Let's see. Now, where's my, okay. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. So when our fixers come in, we used to have a separate sheet for everybody and a waiver. And instead, we decided to streamline it this way. So, and now we've streamlined it further, where we fill in the names of we have regular people. So we have sheets with the regular people, or we might make one up for that cafe. So they don't have to spend time filling this in. They just need to sign. And actually, this one doesn't show the signature. I think we revised it, as we often do, to add the signature. But if you see at the top here, they're basically, in addition to signing in, they're signing a waiver about what they understand about the cafe, that there are house rules, that we treat each other with respect, that they're not meant to make arrangements to complete, that we don't facilitate arrangements they might make with a client to fix something, but they're free to do it as long as they understand that that is on their own time and under their own safety, as it were, and risks. And then we also, now how do I get to my next thing? Oh, yeah, here we go. All right, oh, there's our town, our hardware store manager, actually. Okay, wait, let me. Sorry, I can't get to my other, what is that? It's, oh, there it is. It's at the bottom. Wait a minute. Sorry. Okay, so the other, okay. So we do a similar sign in for the guests, and the waiver is very similar. People sign in, and then we have at the bottom something that we've talked about. We actually didn't want to highlight it because we felt like it was too hard to manage, but you may be photographed. Photographs and videos taken during the event, if used, will only be used to publicize this and other Repair Cafe events. Never has been an issue. And then finally, we have, let's see, wait, oh, I don't have it here. Okay, I don't have it. We also have another sign in, very basic, if you want to hear about future cafes, if you want to volunteer at future cafes. And we have generated volunteers that way. One advantage of our town by town arrangement is when it's in your town, you are responsible for getting 2 or 3 volunteers for the day of that supplement the volunteers in our group. But most of us, if we can, go to each of the cafes that we have. And then the final document I wanted to show you is this. And again, our job tickets have been revised and re-revised and re-revised. Whoops, happened to it. It's now about as basic as it can get. We no longer have pre-registration. When we've tried that, people didn't show up. And it was a lot of work to do it. And we literally had 12 people not show up at one cafe. And we thought, really, that's just not worth our time. We do have an email that people can email to find out more information. But basically, you know, the guest, the arrival time, and I can give this to Suzie, you know, any comments. And we made a half sheet because in our ecological mindset, we, you know, cut our sheets in half rather than having a full sheet. And then for a while we had something on the back, and now we basically just have it blank and invite people if they have any extra comments, you know, about the repair, about the cafe, to do it on the back. I would just say quickly also that our committee, we have specialists. Someone does the getting the word out. I'm in charge of recruiting and sustaining the relationship with the fixers. We do have someone, luckily, who's very computer savvy. She does our forms, she does our data. So she goes through all of these, and I think she sends them to you, Suzie, for the Sustainable Hudson Valley. And it's, in the beginning, we paid more attention. Wow, lamps, but now we know it's wow, lamps. We were interested that most people come late morning, you know. So at the first one, we had 2 shifts. We gave that up and just had 1 shift, 10 to 2. And we do always give pizza, always coffee, always baked goods. We don't have any limitations on that. And I guess that's all I'll say, because I want to make sure there's a little time for questions.
Can you stop screen sharing? I think you have to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Excellent. Okay, now we'll unpin you. All right, so I just wanted to say, I wanted to ask if anybody on the panel wanted to add anything, or otherwise I'm going to start going through questions.
Yeah, just a quick reaction to Adelia's last comment about registration. From a volunteer management perspective, I get 2 benefits from having registration, pre-event registration. One is I know if my marketing is working, so I get a rough sense of how many people may show up. Yes, no-shows run 30 to 50% of those registrations, but that tends to be offset by walk-ins. But at least I know my marketing is working, because I always worry from a volunteer management perspective, if I have an event and guests don't show up, then I've failed to show that I value my volunteers' time, and then I will lose them. So that's always like my #1 priority, is to keep my volunteers happy, and keeping them busy keeps them happy. So it's just, and then, you know, knowing what kinds of items are coming in. Sometimes I give the volunteers the opportunity to review that list of projects, and they can provide their input and maybe pack an extra tool in their tool bag, anticipating that something unusual is coming in the door. It may never show up, but they feel prepared. So that's all.
So it is 7:22. I'm happy to stay longer. We can open the Zoom longer. It's just up to who wants to hang out. So I just want to say that we're appreciative if anyone who wants to stay. There are a lot of questions. There were a few right now. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I think that's the easiest way to do it. The one question that I got right away, oh, you know what, it was on the last one. Someone asked about whether we had registered with the official site. And the answer is yes. We're here talking about repair cafes right now, right? With Martina Postma and all that. And so and it's in the book, The Repair Revolution. The step one is to go to the international site, which is repaircafe.org. And you pay them a small fee. I believe it's 49 euros. And I don't know the exchange rate right now, but it's $50 effectively. And you register with them and they give you forms. They give you examples of waivers and all the graphics that you've seen. The graphics come from them. And then that's the only fee. I mean, I help coordinate these 53 cafes. We never charge them at all. Everyone raises their own money, does their own thing. My boss raises money through Sustainable Hudson Valley. I mean, we do not charge at all for any services, but that's where the money goes. And then you're registered with the international site. And like I said, you have this paperwork. We have revised our paperwork. The house rules, all that is what I'm talking about, and original forms of job tickets and stuff. We revised ours for New York State law because all of our cafes are in New York State. And I would highly suggest that you have a lawyer who's knowledgeable about your state's law to make sure things are covered, but the basic stuff comes from them. And then one of the other questions was, and so that's the answer to the waiver question, which came through again, that the waivers really come from the international site, but I'm always happy to talk to you. I'm always happy to send you ours so you can see it. We have insurance. I know there was some talk about insurance with the libraries. Sustainable Hudson Valley is our fiscal sponsor. And one of the things that means is that they can provide insurance for us, certificates as needed. So if you hook up with a fiscal sponsor, and I know Don actually has more information on this, he was able to, they are their nonprofit. We are not a nonprofit, but Sustainable Hudson Valley is our nonprofit. So he went through that process of becoming a nonprofit to be able to then have access to insurance.
In our case, the towns are all providing insurance, what do you call it, a rider for the day.
Right. And that it doesn't always happen that you need insurance, but sometimes spaces need it. And these are the different ways to go about it. Correct. And so then Paul Lemaire, who I believe I met, he's a fixer. He wanted to know how Elizabeth recruited in Jersey City, because that was a brand new cafe and it was a very different venue for her. So that was his question from the chat.
Well,
Elizabeth.
one of the things was the Repair Cafe is held in a church because they have a ramp from the street. They've got a gym, they've got a bathroom, they've got a kitchen, all on the same floor. And I happen to have been a member of that church long ago and then moved back. And I went to make a pitch to the vestry board saying that I think this is in keeping with your sense of what it means to be part of a loving community, that anybody who walks through the door is welcome. Would you let me do that? So I had a built-in audience, if you will, to say, I'm looking for coaches, and some of the people already volunteered their time. There's to fix things at the church or at the gym. Also, it so happens the gym is rented out to a number of organizations throughout the city. They have a number of senior programs there. There are a group of people who gather there 5 days a week for exercise class. Some of them do knitting, some of them do painting. So I've been able to talk to them. I put flyers up in the 2 parks that are in the downtown area. The church also put requests for an information about the Repair Cafe on their news bulletins. I made announcements at the church. I contacted my local library a block and a half from me and said, I'm new to town. I don't know anybody yet. Would you let me put something up in your library where you have memos from the public? Yes. I went around, I put up, in addition to, as somebody was saying, Adelia, about the hair salons, and the flyers really work. I also put them in places, the local cafes. I contacted the local schools I was walking down the street one day, and there was an open garage, and there was a bunch of kids wearing all matching t-shirts, and they were working on stuff. And I stopped and talked to the adult. It turns out it was the robotics club from a local high school. When I explained what a repair cafe was, the man said, "We'll bring the kids." He was so thrilled. He said, "We're coming back next time." So part of it was just literally walking down the street and making conversation with people. So
I had some success. It didn't continue because the guy left the school, but we have a private school in our town that's has a shaker. It's in Shaker buildings, and the motto of the Shakers is hands to work, and they have a hands to work program for the kids. It's not a Shaker school, but we did on one cafe get about half a dozen kids coming, and boy, were they great for the electronics and the technical stuff. It's been hard to recruit them back, but I think that's another thing that people can do if they have good connections with a school. But honestly, we've had people, once we got started, people contact me. They hear about it, they want to come. So I think it's sort of, it's just networking. Now I mention it to everywhere and anyone I ever meet. And literally, and I find people.
Oh, and also I went to the local park association meeting, and when I was brand new, and introduced myself, and they said, "Well, how did you hear about us?" And I told them, and I said, "I have something I'd like to tell you about. I'm trying to start a repair cafe." And I went to a local community garden at their annual meeting and spoke about it, and I got volunteers from both of those locations. So as Adelia said, it's just networking. Oh, and then I was walking down the street one day, and a woman was sitting on the stoop, and she said, "What are you smiling about?" And I said, "Well, I just got a volunteer for my repair cafe." And she said, "What's that?" Well, it turns out that she is a council person for one of my districts. And she said, "Well, I can help connect you." So she did. Yes, flyers work, but also just anytime there was a couple walking through the park, and this woman had on this most outrageous pair of jeans I've ever seen. And it was made of something like 50 different patches. And I stopped her and said, "Did you do that?" She said, "My mother did." And I said, "Well, I'm really fascinated." And then I started the repair cafe. So the young couple came to the repair cafe. Go to a public place, get a cup of coffee, sit there and chat with people.
It is a little bit incredible how many people haven't heard of it. And yet it, as it continues to spread, it's a very, what they call sticky idea. It really is, it's easy to get your head around. It's easy to, and so, I will say this: on our website, we have several videos, or you could also Google them, but on our website, which I did think I put in the chat, which is repaircafehv.org, we had the opportunity to be on the Today Show in April. And we actually, they came to the Terrytown and Cafe, which was brand new, and they filmed there, and it really gives you a sense of a cafe, what it's like. But then we also threw a little wild thing in the city, which is kind of, more about optics for them, but it was a lot of fun. And we brought people from all over the Hudson Valley and Jersey together, which was really fun, and sort of put on a little cafe. But we have those videos on our website. And there was also a video many, many years ago with John Wackman up at New Paltz that it's just, it just makes you tear up every time you watch it. It's just very emotional. Just really, it's like a Sunday CBS or whatever, NBC Sunday. It's just a very emotional thing when things get fixed, and people are happy to see their old grandmother's, costume jewelry reworn. And so, that really, anything like that can really give the sense of what a cafe is in terms of if you need to convince someone that this is something they need to do for you.
And to Susie's point, everybody I've ever talked to about, "Do you know what a repair cafe is?" The answer is no. And I say, I've never met anybody who has. And then I explained it. And I think I told you, Suzie, the Today Show came out about because the producer's wife had seen the flyer I'd put up in the park next to the library. You just never know.
Yeah. Someone asked me, "How are you ever going to get people to volunteer to fix things?" I said, "Are you kidding? People who like to fix things, and that's something to remember. And I include myself in that. And all of us in our committee are people who make or fix things. We don't do it for our repair cafes generally because we're too busy organizing, but there's this passion, for using your hands. And so I think it's easier than you think to get.
And it's funny because I know Adelia is up there in the country, right? So people are actually a little handier. where I live, maybe not so much, but then all of a sudden we have all these electrical engineers who are retired and who are just fabulous with stuff. So it really, I mean, in all areas, we have someone who came, she found out about it and reached out. She's a conservator at the Met in costuming, and she comes and sews at our cafe. I mean, so, you know, in a city area, you can still have really skilled people and really skilled. Unfortunately, one of our speakers couldn't make it tonight because she's working too much, but she's a graphic designer. And so she does graphic design for us and does these amazing social media posts. And, you know, everyone has so many people have skills they can lend to the movement in all kinds of areas. And I mean, there's definitely a, I'm just reading the chat, which I can also send. Don is giving advice about different things to have in your kit. Consumables, yes.
Yeah, I should say that I was going to talk about that, and I think I skipped over it, but I think there are I can give the list of our, you know, their lists, and obviously the Repair Revolution is full of lists. My husband's our gluer, and he has so many glues. So, you know, people who know how to do these things have their practices, but there certainly are standard things to have on hand.
And I've also found that once you get somebody to be a participant in the Repair Cafe, they usually end up bringing a friend, a coworker, the guy down the block, their spouse, because they enjoy it so much. They love solving problems. They love talking to other people who like to solve problems. They love seeing somebody's face light up when you've fixed something that's irreplaceable emotionally. It's just so satisfying.
Someone asked in the chat about tools, what tools to bring, and Don said he's correct. You don't need to buy tools. Your coaches bring tools. And so that's why I said we have lists, and a lot of it is also in Repair Revolution of what to bring. So I'm a jewelry fixer, and the more I've been to cafes, the more equipment I have that I bring and then I, you know, stock. And so I also bring, I guess I do kind of give my own consumables away, basically. I mean, especially when it's costume, it's just not very expensive. But I one of my favorite toolkit pieces is a box of vintage pieces that are just sort of random, but are very effective for fixing costume jewelry, because you need every color and every size and every this. And I just go digging through and so people then donate things when they're broken. I just keep them at the end and I put them in my box. But yeah, coaches will bring their tools, and you know, you always get there and you're like, oh, I should have brought that. Like, there's always one thing that gets left behind, but everyone else has tools. And I've lent my little pliers to the, you know, I mean, we do share at the cafes, and there's usually enough tools to go around. But yeah, people bring their own stuff for sure. Let's see. Yes, I actually made a jewelry list I'm happy to share, because as I kept going through things, because I kept, you know, every cafe you go to, you know, different things to bring. But yeah, findings. I mean, I'll go to Michael's and buy stuff for that kind of stuff, but I also have like what they call demi-fine, just sterling and gold fill, because I do that kind of work too. So if it's, you know, if it happens, right?
I would add to that I know there's a lot of talk about keeping it free,
Yeah.
but realistically, don't think it's free if you're shifting the burden of cost onto your volunteers. So we ask them for their time and talent, but let's not also ask them for their treasure. So it's reasonable for the coach to ask for reimbursement if they're using something out of their personal kit.
You're absolutely
right. We do that. Unfortunately, often they don't, but I say it in the emails to them. We say it when they're there. We say it at the end, that we don't want them to spend anything except their time and energy and goodwill and skill. And we have encouraged people to bring up. The sewers really like it if it's a zipper, for there to be a zipper, because you can't possibly have all the zippers you might need. And also even to take the zippers out before they come, but that's not always realistic. Also, an interesting request from two different people who do sewing for us is, please ask people to bring clean textiles, clean clothing. And I never would have thought that people wouldn't, but I guess some people who have something old that they love, maybe they haven't washed it that recently. And so she was someone who just wasn't comfortable with something that, you know, wasn't clean. So that's something we now put in our flyer.
We had a similar incident where, and the coach did it, but he grumbled, and he was right. He was fixing a vacuum cleaner, which are number 2 thing fixed at our cafes, and it was filthy. And that's often sometimes why they're not working, is because they're gummed up. But he's like, it was disgusting to have to work on. And he was, you know, so it's hard. I mean, I think one of the things we need, and as a fixer, I have trouble with this as well. We need to empower our coaches to say no. We're all volunteers. and we're all there to do what we can. But if it's not something we're comfortable fixing for whatever reason, time, just too difficult, you know, we're all allowed to say no. Just reading. Okay, awesome.
Well, one of the things I send out to the fixers, we sometimes do phone calls, but mostly it's by email. And I have kind of a standard procedures that includes that, you know, just discussion of what's expected of you and what's not expected of you. And so many of ours come back over and over that I don't need to send it to everybody. I sort of attach it now at the end. So if you're new, you can go to this attachment and it makes the email shorter, because I was writing these long emails about all the ins and outs and it was getting a little crazy. So I'll give you some of those kind of documents to Suzie.
Okay, great. Yes, yes. Yeah, I'll send a lot of stuff out as, you know, and we're always evolving too. What we ended up doing, because we have so many cafes, is a shared drive. We do a lot on Google Docs, and that way we were able to share a lot with each other. And but it's always growing and growing and growing. You know, because there's like the fixer list, the fixer tool list has been the latest thing, because, you know, there's a lot of institutional knowledge and it's all up here. And every time there's a new cafe or a new volunteer, you know, we're trying to make it easier for everybody. Okay, good. Right. All right. So, and yeah, there's a great group in New Jersey, which is Repair Cafe Garden State. If anyone, like, I think I mentioned that, but if anyone wants to reach out to them, you know, and I also want to say, I see Peter Mui here, which is great. There are other cafes, there are other Fix It kind of things. He runs Fix It Clinic in Berkeley, California. So, I mean, all these things are applicable to any kind of repair little clinic that anyone wants to do. But a lot of the rules we're talking about having to pay repaircafe.org, those are the Repair Cafe, you know, branded, or it's sort of like a franchise, you know, but sometimes people have different models. There are just so many ways to go about this and do this. This is just the one we've embraced. And we all work together behind the scenes. We all communicate. There is different, there's a lot of, there's going to be like Zero Waste Washington puts on a conference. I mean, there are a lot of other places, and there's international conferences and Zooms that you can join. There's a lot of community. There's a Discord server for anyone who's on Discord that's fixers. And the concept is that, like, it's global fixers, I think, that you could, at the middle of a cafe, no matter where you are in the world, get online and ask a question. Someone else will probably be awake and looking at this. And so there's a lot of support. Yeah, I know. It's my
By the way, on the advice point, you know, that like a gardener advice, what we have found is that if the gardeners, and we also have had an architect and a builder giving advice as well as computer advice, we tend to have those towards the front. And so when the guests go towards the other tables to get their thing that they came in to get fixed, they notice there's a gardener there. And then on their way out, they spend some time talking. And so now those people, job tickets aren't really useful for them, but we're giving them we did at the last one for the first time, sort of a login sheet. So we know how many people did come for gardening advice and computer advice, and quite a few do. And the architecture, that was sort of a lark the first time. It turned out he had a number of people saying, well, I want to build a screen porch and I'm not sure, you know, I want to renovate my basement, whatever. So I was a therapist before I retired, and we even talked about having a therapy corner, but we gave up that idea.
Well, I have to say, one of the things about Repair Cafe, especially as pandemic was still sort of going on, and even now, is we are a little bit therapists, because it's about sitting with the guest and talking. And, you know, whether or not, you know, there's a lot of debate in the community about who's fixing, you know, everyone has a different sort of aesthetic. I know that I help a lot of people fix jewelry who can't do it themselves anymore because they can't see, or they have arthritis in their hands. And so, you know, but they still sit with you and listen, even if they're not going to ever do it themselves. And it's really about that interaction and that community spirit and getting to know someone new. And there's a lot of that too. So it's kind of an interesting.
We talked about having a do-it-yourself table. And in order to introduce the concept, when I wrote to the 15 or so fixers who are coming to our next cafe, I said, if you're someone who would act proactively, like to help someone, I know all of you are great at answering questions, but if you actually would like to teach someone, let me know. And then if I get someone who's interested in learning, we'll direct them. So this is a guy who can sort of fix anything. But if we get an electoral or mechanical thing, and I think we'll start asking people, are you interested in learning? We might try to match make. It's sort of a new, I know it's the aspiration of all repair cafes, but honestly, it doesn't happen most of the time. So this is our effort to start trying to match make between a fixer who really would like to teach and someone who would like to learn. And I'll let you know how it goes.
Great. And it can really be helpful when things are crowded too, because there is a wait. It's first come, first served. Most places in our network don't use a sign up, and it can be frustrating. You know, if everyone comes with lamps, you have to wait for a lamp guy. There's multiple lamp people all the time. But I mean, that can be frustrating.
Suzie?
And yeah,
Excuse me, if I can, before people bail, can I put a plug in for our third Thursday webinar? Well, not webinar, but Zoom call. So for everybody's information, we have a once monthly open call for repair cafe organizers and other community repair organizers around the country. So we typically get 10 to 20 people dial in, and these are for people who are, actively working to organize repair cafe type events. And so you can just ask questions of your colleagues around the country, get tips and tricks, solve problems, figure out how to deal with unique situations. So I pasted the information for this in the chat. You're all welcome to attend. There's no cost, there's no agenda. We just jump online, we talk for an hour or so, and then we bail. It's not recorded, and it's just kind of a great opportunity, kind of a virtual water cooler.
excellent. And I also saw in the chat, Peter Mui put the link to the Discord server too, for anyone who's interested.
Yes.
I will send the chat out because I think that's important. So, are there any other questions? Because I know we have gone long, but and we could all talk about this all day. So we got. Thank you. Okay. Well, feel free to reach out to, I think any of us, we're happy to answer questions. We're happy to grow the movement and happy to lighten the load on anyone who wants to do this, because it really is, it seems intimidating, but I think what Elizabeth said about it could be any size. I always encourage people. I'll go to a library that wants to start one and just do a jewelry demo if they want. It's really, it can be whatever it is, and it will be great, and they are great. And I have organized my own in Irvington. We have a consortium cafe in the river towns, and I was nervous, but it is great. And so, there are all kinds of ways to do it. I think what's really important is to have teammates, no matter where they're from, whether, and this is also a great support network, but try not to do it by yourself, because it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Thank you so much, Suzie.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thank you for your leadership and
Thank you.
your support.
My pleasure. Thank you guys all. Really enjoyed it. Okay.
Bye-bye.